I'm going to ask you to get out your, hi everybody, welcome to week 11 of CO300. I'm going to ask you to get out your notes or your journal. If you have been writing your notes in longhand, get that out. Or if you're writing on the computer screen, open up a window to be able we're going to take some notes, but just to do a little exercise to connect and review what we did last week in a kind of whirlwind approach from last week. So we are still in the middle of research and inquiry. I don't know why I capitalized inquiry and not research. Maybe it's because this is really a giant skill that I hope that we're working on. What we did last week was look at alternative approaches to argument, and we considered how, oh boy, let's scroll down this way. The traditional form of argument, classic rhetorical adversarial rhetoric that looks at logos, ethos, and pathos with the goal of to win, to convince, or to persuade, has some real limitations, particularly in situations where people don't want to be persuaded or don't want to be convinced or are already sure about their positions. And in replacement of that, or an alternative to that, I should say, is what has been called Rogerian argument. That's more invitational, consensual, and kind of friendly, built on the work of Carl Rogers, who's a humanistic psychologist that's interested in human understanding, that's rooted in unconditional positive regard for the other, empathetic understanding of the other, and a sense of congruence or genuineness where you allow the person to be or encourage them to express themselves. Our goals here to gain perspective, understanding, to find common ground, to maintain a non-threatening environment, since usually if we feel that our identities are under threat, we shut down. And then we connected this to how to practice this is to practice empathetic understanding with a rhetorical imagination, and how to avoid judgment and evaluative language. We looked at one way of doing this as a mindfulness practice where you're just aware of the present moment. Thich Nhat Hanh calls this bare awareness, because you're just aware without the colorations of you evaluating it as being good or bad. You're just aware of it. And this is non-evaluative and non-reactive. An example of this is mindfulness-based stress reduction. And we ended up last time kind of considering the connection between mental health and being able to have a good conversation with ourselves, not just the other. I wanted to pick up on that as an intro exercise. Actually, any questions on this? Did anybody think about this or have anything come up about this since our meeting on Wednesday? Okay, what I wanted to do is, since some people expressed interest in mindfulness as a practice, I want to do a different kind of, and kind of connect this to one of the things we read at the early part of the semester, which was LaMott's shitty first drafts. If you remember, LaMott called her first, do you remember what LaMott called the first draft? The really shitty draft? Basically, we're building to a mindful writing exercise. I can never spell exercise. There we go. She called it the down draft. Where you just get everything down. She also had a very colorful metaphor that those voices in your head that are telling you that what you're doing isn't any good, or that are questioning whether or not what you're doing, that you should like turn them all the way down and not listen to them. Is that you can't necessarily stop those voices, especially if you have had them in your past or whatever, but you can turn them down and learn not to listen to them. In the maker's eye, we get the idea that we should be super suspicious about when other people praise our work, and we should be suspicious when people critique our work, that we are the ones in the end that are going to be able to tell whether or not our work is pursuing it or not, whether or not we should pursue it or not, which has some limitations, especially if you consider that the audience is really who you're writing for. But what I'm building to here, what I want us to think about is a kind of way to bridge what we did last week with this broader practice of drafting, which is free writing. We've done free writing before in the past, but this adds another little dimension to it that I'm actually going to set a timer. And one of the things that why I wanted to do this when I was working on this class over the weekend was thinking about this idea in Rogerian argument that we're supposed to have unconditional positive regard for the other. And I wonder, one of my students in another class was saying that we're generally, it's easier for us to be unconditionally positive to another than it is to be unconditionally positive to ourselves. And that we often can be incredibly critical of ourselves in a way that's not helpful, especially at the early stages of a writing process, which is where we are now. In fact, we might shut down really interesting avenues of research or inquiry or writing because we're too self-critical, right? There's time to be self-critical, and in the drafting early brainstorming process of what we might do is not one of them. So what I want to do is actually give you the outline for how to do this again, for those of you that want to try to use this as a tool to develop your own mindful awareness or your non-reactive awareness. And this is what I do every day. This is my meditation practice, partially because whenever I sit to meditate, my mind just races. I think about all these different things. So what I do is I capture it, or I externalize it, if we're going to use the language of Joseph or of Jonathan Levin in the videos I posted this week, into some kind of a book, right? So I would just want to give us some practice doing that for about I wanted to go until 8:15, and that took longer to explain than I wanted. So let's go just 3 minutes. I try to do it for 20 minutes or 15 minutes, depending on how I'm going. And what you want to do is just write down everything that's happening in your mind without the coloration of whether or not it's good or bad. So your goal is to just keep writing and try to be aware of what's coming up in your head. So I would say, I wonder if this exercise is any good, or if I even should be sharing it with my students. Oh my God, there's some more self-doubt. Wow, look at that go. I'm also thinking about happiness. You get what I'm saying? Cool. So set a timer for a set amount of time. I'm going to say 3 minutes, although I do it for 20. And just write down whatever, free write whatever you're thinking about. If you're developing your skills of mindfulness, you're really trying to practice non-reactive awareness. So if you catch yourself thinking this is good or bad, or this or the other thing, or you're judging yourself doing it, like you've not written for a while, just try to recognize that and write it out. And I think studies have shown that handwriting is actually more beneficial here than typewriting, but I would need to find that research. Okay, so let's start a timer for 3 minutes. Ready? I'm going to do with you. We are going to just write, free write for 3 minutes. Ready, set, go. Okay, that's 3 minutes. Seems like some of us are still really going. I know I could have just gone on forever, partially because that's good. There's some prompts that you can use as well that work for me to get going. If you want to establish a daily writing practice and experiment with that as a mode of meditation, I know I feel way better after doing that. I just feel better doing that for 3 minutes. The questions that have shown, one of them is, what are you grateful for? So if you actually identify in writing what you are grateful for, your happiness levels go up. A question that you're working on that I'm curious about is, what is happiness? What's going to make us happy? Another one that I would consider us thinking about at this point in the semester is remembering Edmondson from the beginning of the semester and thinking about, what does a real education look like to you? What does success look like to you? What kind of a job do you want to do? So your hopes and dreams, articulating that might be something to do. You can also write about what pisses you off, especially if you're having a hard time getting started. Comments? How did that go? Should I have given us more time? We'll see. If none of us want to talk about our research, then I really messed up my lesson planning here.
I liked it. It's a good practice.
Yeah, I thought it was cool.
Cool. And I mean, this is another tool for the tool belt. I do not want to imply that mindfulness can cure ADD or that mindfulness can revolutionize everything or anything like that. But I do think it is, again, to build on what we were doing last week, if one of the goals is to practice our ability to really listen and be a good listener, I think it can be very therapeutic, and research has shown it's very therapeutic to just write out and listen. Okay, so there's two things basically that, in terms of the one thing I wanted to do today, mindful free writing exercise as a practice of non-reactive awareness and non-evaluative listening. Oh boy. This is like Rogerian Argument. And then I do want to start thinking about, how do we, and I'm curious, I kind of want to shift away from me talking into more of you helping me understand, how good are we at organizing information in a longer research process? So you're engaged in a 3, 4, 5-week research process in this class. 3 of these weeks are very formal, so we're kind of requiring you to share what you found and how that's going. And then you're going to continue to do that research a little bit after this without me collecting anything. So I'm wondering, how do we organize our thoughts and ideas? So how do we organize information that we've found? Do we have any tips or tricks? How good are we at this? Or questions that we have? Kind of looking for tips and tricks and tools.
For me, the biggest tips for me is I always make a list before I write anything.
Of what?
Of the organization, like what I want to say and why I want to say that, and the evidence, or like the what, why, who, where. You know what I mean.
Yeah,
like
I do.
Some questions I ask myself.
Awesome.
I use like sticky notes a lot, and I'll write, like each piece of information on the sticky note, and then I'll put it in a line and see if it makes sense.
That's close to the one that I wanted to share. My graduate advisor really recommended, and I use this for my graduate thesis. So, or both of them actually, which, you know, is an 80-page paper with something like 60 sources. It was note cards. So I still do, I have at my desk just a stack of, as you said, sticky notes and note cards. And so I will, you can put the topic on the top of the note card. So, and then as your topics get interest with tags, basically. So I'm tagging the note cards with like, this is about the benefits of social benefits of e-portfolios, academic benefits of e-portfolios, problems with e-portfolios. So I might have like the topic and then think about all these little different tags and then organize the tags underneath them. You can do that in your notes as well. So this is close to McCarthy's, but I could also say that this is like headings and visual appearance is a really big one that is fun to work on, that you're really thinking about how you can make it more accessible to yourself. So the headings would be like your sense of tags. So you could have a section for, does anybody do this? Like have big sections for your notes where you start categorizing to help categorize them? Can we get some examples of what section titles would be?
Yeah. So I section my notes is like there's one section about like either the context of the article or like information about the author. And then I have another section that's just all of their arguments and claims. And then a section for like important quotes. And then.
So you still do this source by source. Like you have all of that for one source and then all of it for another source.
Yeah. You
don't like sort. Says that doesn't work for me as much because there's so many different ways to do this. Mm-hmm. I'm thinking about like sorting that information into what eventually will be my document.
Yeah, I don't really do that.
Good. I wonder if that's going to help. So this is kind of in broader conversation about what are the main, so you should, if you want to do this, you should ask, what are the main parts that I need to address? And once you get a sense of what your main parts are, then you can not just paraphrase what another person is saying. So you are doing that. And actually, I like that as a way of organizing the information, because now instead of needing to go to all of those articles, you have all your notes that you can go to, which saves you a ton of mental bandwidth because you're not like refinding the article and refinding the main points. You've done all that. Now you're just taking your body of like context, main information, all of that is really good. But now I'm pulling that into a new document. And I'm thinking about really, I mean, I would have a section in my notes that's at the very top of them, or my document, my working document, as a potential thesis. So what am I really what is my main point? What am I trying to say? I'm also thinking about who are my potential audiences. I will tell you right now, if you write to a general audience and you don't have a very good reason why, or you have not thought any more specifically about who you're targeting, it's almost impossible to get an A on the final projects of this class. Why? Because it's not advanced. Even if you write to a general audience, I want to know how educated, how old, what cultural experiences, liberal or conservative, so on and so on and so on and so on and so forth. It's true that a lot of your topics, like I'm thinking of yours, Jason, like how to get people to read more. Well, you could say, and students tell me all the time, well, everybody should be interested in this, or everybody's interested in learning how to read more. Bullshit. I bet, how many people do you think are interested in reading more? What percentage of the population? First question, are we talking America, or are we just assuming that everyone's like American? Because your audience speaks English. So right now we're at whatever the percentage of the world population. You see what I'm saying? I wonder what percentage of the population is really interested in reading more? What kinds of things do those people like? So you're almost beginning to think of as like a marketer, like who can I provide value for? Remember, you're really thinking in terms of advanced writing is less about proving your knowledge, that's easy, and more about providing value. Like, hey, maybe you want to think about how this obscure film illustrates the geopolitical dynamics of the Cold War. Maybe not, but if you do, if you're into that, man, this is going to be a valuable read. In fact, you're going to be glad you spent your last 5 minutes with me. So another way of thinking about this is one, I'm thinking like this is like really, and this is same goes with your cover letter. You should be always revising what your thesis is, away from hire me and more towards I am this, this, and this, or I can offer you this, this, and this. So then I'm thinking in terms of what's my thesis, and I'm always tweaking that. And so if that's kind of at the top of my document, because if I find something that modifies my thesis, I want to be sure that I put that down on paper. Otherwise, I just forget it. Also, if I find a potential audience or I'm thinking about who this might connect to, I'm going to put that down. Another key heading that I like to have is evidence or arguments. So you could have like a evidence argument section to start, but then as that goes, you have your different reasons. You're also going to have a counter argument or objections. And my favorite section of all, oh right, you want a works cited page or all of your sources in one place. And then at the very end, I always, always, always have a scrap page so that I can move things out of my document. I heard a really cool thing this morning too. What's the most important key on the keyboard?
The power button.
That's probably a better answer than this one. So let's, I'll say yes. And most important key on the keyboard. When I heard it, I thought escape. I'm like, man, what does that tell you about your mental status?
No, maybe like delete.
Yeah, that's what they said.
Oh.
Why is delete the most important key on the keyboard?
I guess I just thought because it's like the most helpful, because you can't really delete your writing on a piece of paper unless you haven't erased it.
Why else is delete the most important key on the keyboard?
It allows you to edit.
Yeah, when we write well, isn't a lot of the problem that we actually overwrite and we write too much, or we give the audience what they don't need? All good writing is rewriting, remember this? So I know for me, it is impossible, nearly impossible, to delete something that I really like. And that gets in the way of good writing. So instead of deleting it, I just, or if you're attached to your writing, like I am, if you're attached to the work that went into your writing, it's Control plus X is the best key on the keyboard to cut and paste. Oops. Control X, cut, Control V, paste. Okay, if we were gonna adjust this for Bitzer's idea, this is like what I'm trying to, this is like the most general, like this would work for a cover letter. This would work for a memo or a point. This is what I need to say. This is why what I'm saying, who I'm saying it for, what I'm gonna say, what they might object to. You can think about this as an objection if we're using the traditional court case model. My responses to those objections, and then the end. You might also, some people like to have a section for the conclusion. I don't have the intro in here because usually you should write intros last, and we'll get into that a little bit later. But you might also think of the exigence as one of the big things here, problem to be solved.
So is your thesis just like you explaining the exigence?
Sometimes. If you're VATS, like if you really like what VATS is saying, that we basically make our own exigences up, then I would say more yes. Like you're basically like, hey, this is why this is a problem. You're basically explaining the problem. Traditionally, the exigence is usually what gets used as the hook. So like, did you know that teenage boys are learning about sex through pornography? Crazy. Therefore, fathers need to step it up and talk to their kids about sex. So usually the exigence kind of comes before the thesis, because the thesis, the main point, is the solution to the problem. Okay, this is for a traditional argument. And again, maybe I should say that this is under headings that I can use as one way to organize my information. You notice this is another type of list in a sense, and it is a list of what you want to say. So that really helps. Any questions on this? And I'm also kind of really trying to get the visual appearance of notes. How would this change if I was writing a more Rogerian argument? Control X, Control V, headings for a Rogerian. The main difference, you're not going to say what you think first. What's the problem? Who are they? Then their evidence arguments. So instead of the counter arguments, those go up here. Their evidence arguments, their reasons. Now, after that, you put your main point. your response. Over time, potential audiences is going to ideally get dropped down to audience. It's who I'm talking to. Okay, what we're gonna see, whoops, we don't wanna look at this. Or maybe we do. Let's see what's in there. This is for the final essay of the course. So this is what's due on Friday of week 15. Or no, we won't. We're gonna look at, oh yeah, maybe we will. Did you develop good reasons? Did you make a clear and well-qualified claim that takes into account constraints? Did you provide proofs and reasons with evidence? Did you avoid logical fallacies, provide additional support when necessary? Did you use careful reasoning, quality peer-reviewed research, intellectual rigor? Was it organized, and so on and so forth? How well did you demonstrate deepened engagement with rhetorical understanding of strategies? Might this essay be used for future professional portfolios as concrete evidence of our learning outcomes? It's not what I wanted to show you. What I did want to show you was the outline for the PowerPoint presentation, which I uploaded. Right now I have due on Monday. I'm thinking about moving this back to Wednesday. But you are creating a 12-slide, 3-minute PowerPoint with audio embedded in each slide. And you can do this using Google Slides if you do not have PowerPoint on your computer. Basically, what your PowerPoint should do is clearly articulate a specific exigence. So your initial exigence might be microplastics in the ocean. Your eventual exigence might be the role of sewage plants in microplastics in the ocean and how they're not made up to spec or something like that. You identify a particular audience capable of modifying the exigence. And again, exigence is just another fancy jargony word for problem, obstacle, imperfection. So you identify a specific imperfection. You identify a target audience capable of modifying said imperfection. You persuade them to modify that imperfection. And as you go, you consider their arguments or other constraints that might enable or not. You're going to be graded on your argument, how persuasive it is, which means your exigence, audience, and constraints. And you're also going to be graded on your multimodal presentation, i.e. how well you use text, visuals, and speech. And I do not care about audio quality, just the fact that you have done your best to present the information with your speech. Okay, that being said, I was hoping to have more than 15 minutes to do this, and we have 8. There's other softwares you can use. Honestly, you want to be backing up your work. So Google Drive is a really good tool. EndNote, there are professional citation generators that I think are a little bit beyond this class. So there's software to help you keep track of all of this, but honestly, word processing is probably good enough for our purposes. It has been good enough for me. Maybe word processing and some handy physical things to touch if you like physically touching things like I do. Okay, questions about any of this? Hopefully you feel more equipped to begin organizing your notes in a way that's saving you work later. Okay, then let's talk research help. Does anybody feel like you'd like some help in developing your research or stuck on exigence, audience, or any of that? Or are we doing good? Maybe I planned this lesson okay.
So, like, in the end, how many sources are you looking for?
I'd say at least in the PowerPoint, probably
Yeah,
at least 6, 7 in the PowerPoint,
Okay.
and at least 10 in the essay.
Okay. And then they don't all have to be academic,
They
obviously.
do not all have to be academic, but you need some academic sources.
Does it matter how many, or
It depends on the topic, honestly. Sometimes you can pull, the more the merrier. So if you can integrate a lot of academic sources, you're going to build ethos. With a topic like yours, or actually a topic like a lot of people's, you can find academic sources that aren't exactly related to your topic, but show
Yeah.
something about your topic.
Yeah, that's what I've been noticing.
So you might be writing your essay on film in the 70s. You might find an essay, an academic article as you're researching on the emotional impacts of cinema, or something like that's tangentially related. You're going this way with your research, and then you find a source that's like here, and you can use one sentence of it and add it to your works cited. Excellent. So that's what we're still trying to, the goals of this class is to synthesize a bunch of information and to get better at finding what's important. The point I wanted to make is that this course is really about processing information and reading situations. So if you remember back to the beginning of this course, we talked about how arguments don't happen in a vacuum. They all happen in a situation. And so effective arguers, effective writers, read situations. They read people. They read and understand what people want and need, and they work to deliver that to them. And that's the difference between a humble, effective writer and an arrogant jerk that just thinks they know what they're doing. So in that sense, I'm hoping that this project helps you extend all the progress you've made on your reading notes, and that you continue to get better at the areas you want to get better at, which for me is quickly and efficiently finding what's important, making good notes of it, and ignoring all the rest. That's why, like, your reading notes for this section, I'm just letting you, they can be over as many sources as you want, or they can just be over one source. I just want you to engage with the world and take good notes on it. I also should say on that note, under sources works cited, you might think about professional organizations or professional leads. Like, holy cow, I really like this person, or I really like this organization. I'm going to make a note of that and maybe offer to help them because I believe in what they're doing. Anybody else feel like you want help with your paper? There is a student, we are kind of stepping away from your topic. This week and the next, we only have 2 more essays from our text. So good job on reading all of these arguments in here. There's 2 more that I'm asking us to read. The one this week is on visual representations and power, as we're starting to think about visuals and their impact in the scope of things. So there's one of the pieces is on unpacking the Tinder lexicon. So it's based on the types of images people put on their dating profiles and what that tells us about power interplays in the world. And another one is on Michelle Obama's Twitter feed and what that tells us about understanding what we think housewives should look like in the fantasy of the American family. There's 2 reasons why I'm assigning these at this point, and I kind of want you to figure out what those are because they're different than what we have, but both of them are good scholarship and that they apply some theory to some problem. So when you're looking at those, whichever one's more interesting, you're going to find what theory are they using, and then how well does it apply to the problem, and what does this relate to in terms of information exchange and in terms of the power of visuals. So I hope you get a chance to spend time with some of them before class on Wednesday, or one of those. And then next week, we're reading the comic book one. Scott McCloud's piece on the power of comics, which is just, I think, incredibly brilliant and fun. All right, well, any questions? Do any of you know what happiness is?
Isn't it a warm gun, like the Beatles said?
No way, you both were going to say that. Those Beatles. So good. No, really, do we know? I think it's crazy that we don't have a really good answer to that question. Did I tell you, like, that was Joseph Campbell's, one of Joseph Campbell's quotes is that the educational system is really good at teaching people how to climb ladders, but not really good at teaching them to assess the buildings that those ladders are propped up against.
I feel that, yeah. I didn't, yeah, hadn't heard that from him. Lately, to me, happiness has been, yeah, it's been theoretical, but it's having my afternoons free. That's all I want.
I like it. I like it. Freedom's part of the ones that I was thinking about.
Just half of the day is all I'm asking for. A couple hours.
Good luck. We can end with the longest longitudinal study of human thriving is a Harvard study by George Valiant. I could find the reference for you. It is the longest. So longitudinal study is when you follow someone over time. They like followed a ton of people over 80 years. The study lasted so long that two researchers died while doing it. So they like had to hand off the research project to the next person. And the person that ended up, his name's George Valiant, Harvard study. And the Atlantic had a piece on it, on what makes us happy. And the New York Times has recently published a piece on what makes us happy, which has been my like kind of independent research. But he started the essay. This is an academic essay. He started the academic essay with, he just said, happiness is love, full stop. They found that the #1 determinant of whether or not people said that they were happy at the end of their life was the quality of their relationships as the #1 indicator of happiness. Which also identifies why so many people are fucking bummed out right now, is because we're more isolated from each other than we ever have been before in the history of our species. Super interesting. That's really good. Obviously, this is like one of the giant philosophical questions of history is how we're happy. So I wanted to bring that up and kind of closing. I know we're a little bit past time. I hope that if you feel like you're lost on your research or you're like, what am I doing this for? You might go back to your readings of Edmondson and think about how can I connect what I'm doing here to something that I really actually care about right now? And maybe it is leisure time in the afternoon. How does it connect? So ideally, you're using this project to advance your own education, which is weird, but maybe not. Cool? So I'll see you on Wednesday. We're going to go over those pieces on the fantasy of the American family and power instantiated through swiping dating apps and see how that connects to our work. Cool. I'm going to stop the recording. If